'umn.edu. That's an Ojibwe greeting for a group of people. That means greetings, all my relations. The Ojibwe people believe that we're all related in some way, and not just to all people, but we are related to the fish and the birds and the wildlife and the rocks and the wind and the water and everything. Everything is connected. Miigazine and Dodame, I'm of the Eagle clan. In the old days, we didn't have last names, Johnson, Isham, whatever. We denoted our families by our clan. Miigazine, I'm of the Eagle clan. Odawa Zagaiganing and Gunjaba. I am from what we call Ottawa Lake, but when the French came through, they noted that we didn't wear earrings like the other tribes they encountered, and so our earlobes weren't stretched. So they refer to the area as Lac or Lake of the Short Ears, and somehow that stuck. Now in the Federal Register, we are now known as the Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians of Wisconsin. So we have issues with a lot of that. I mean, of Wisconsin wasn't even there then. And again, as you said, my English name is Isham. My dad is a full-blooded Ojibwe Indian, and my mom is a full-blooded invasive species. She's full-blooded of all European descents, I think, but yeah, good. My biologist friends like that joke. Others don't. And no offense, it's just a joke there if there's any other invasive species in the room. And also, as he said, I'm the new executive administrator of the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. Little over a year, so I don't know if I can still say new, but Jim Zorn was my predecessor, and he was tremendous, so I got a lot to live up to. And for those of you who don't know what GLFWC is, we are basically a natural resource agency that integrates traditional ecological knowledge in with Western science. We have 11 member tribes from the Great Lakes region in what is now known as Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And our primary responsibility is to assist our member tribes in the exercise implementation of ceded territory, off-reservation hunting, fishing, and gathering rights. We do have the usual biological surveys, we do them all, and all the data collection to set the quotas for the various species of fish, wildlife, plants. We also have our environmental scientists on staff to collect all the relevant data and check for the presence of environmental contaminants. I have 3 with me today. If you could raise your hand, I want to recognize them. They're the best, but don't anyone steal them from me. Yeah, our tribal members, we're very susceptible to environmental contaminants due to the fact that we rely so heavily on the natural resources for much of our diets. We also have climate change scientists coupled with traditional ecological knowledge experts to ensure that we can maintain ecological resiliency to try and ensure the survival of the Ojibwe lifeways. Come back to that a little bit later. And you know more about the greeting that I give in Dinoway-Maganaduk, about all things being related. This is an old theme that we used to talk about a lot. And I had a kind of a different speech made about a week ago. I heard a tribal elder speak, Gary Porter. And so I kind of scrapped that science speech that I had, and I started thinking about kind of the old theme that we were really pushing, and we continue to push it, about how everything is connected. This is what we want to try to influence people and the agencies. We want to see that in their jobs and in their own agency as one, that the environment is one system. You know, that holistic type perspective, or the bigger picture. There's not just one big thing that has gotten our environment in peril. There's not just one big thing that has got our climate changing. It is all the big things and all the so-called little things combined that's got us in this situation that we're in. You know, it seems like I'm getting old, like he said, 30 years in natural resources and a lot of years as a honest politician. So, you know, with age, you tend to start philosophizing a little bit. So get comfortable, because here I go. You know, agencies tend to have all the fields of natural resources broken into specialties, you know, such as the fisheries division or the wildlife division, the solid waste and recycling division, or a water division. And then even broken down further, like the water division will be broken down into surface water, groundwater. You know, I understand why that organizational structure is used. You work on your stream, I'll work on my invasive species, she'll work on the shoreline buffer zones, and you know, Gliffwick has somewhat of that organizational structure as well. Now it's supposed to work like the old adage, think globally, but act locally. And if we all just do our specialized part, then everything will add up like the drops in the proverbial bucket. And in many ways it does work that way. And I'm okay with this setup. I'm not hammering on the setup so much. But what I really want to emphasize to everyone is to not forget the think globally part of that adage. Because what I see sometimes happen under this organizational structure is disconnectedness. Over time, we tend to compartmentalize our jobs. We tend to compartmentalize our thinking, and over time, we forget that bigger picture. A better example of not seeing the big picture is how governments tend to look at developments in a watershed or developments on the landscape. They are seen or looked at on a project-by-project basis. For example, there may be a proposed development in a particular county or on a particular stream. So what happens? They have a zoning hearing and start the approval process, and the hearing will lay out like the possible benefits that the project may have on the local area or the stream. Rarely, if ever, does anyone bring up the cumulative impacts of all those projects from, in our case, Lake Superior, or even the bigger picture of the world. I've attended many a zoning hearing in my political career, 22 years of it. I've heard the request to the boards to just approve my project. I'll give the town an economic benefit for several years, and it will only pollute this one bay. Just a little bit, and only for a little while. Or please approve my asphalt plant, because having that plant here, as opposed to the one that's 20 miles away, it'll lower the cost of buying that asphalt. It will only put pollution in the air in this small radius, and for just a little while. It's only one smokestack. So once again, everything and everyone is related, and everything and everyone is connected. So this little asphalt plant in particular county, which I won't mention, or that one family farm in another particular county, or that zoning variance from a small family home, they all add up. These little impacts add up to make a big, big impact. Mike Wiggins, who's the chairman of the Bad River Tribe in Odana, where we work, he uses the phrase over and over. It's almost like a drinking game. Every time he says it, we drink. But he uses it over and over, and this is, we're suffering a death from 1,000 cuts when he describes all these little impacts. And you know, these little projects seem to have a very high likelihood of gaining approval. And those impacts, again, pile up and pile up. Sometimes at that picocurie level, but sometimes at the gallons per minute level. Now, it's my opinion, and the opinion of 99+% of the world's scientists, but not of 99% of the people on Facebook for some reason, that this way of thinking, this one smokestack here is okay, but repeated 1,000 times over and over, that's what's led us to where we are affecting our world climate. These tiny parts per millions of CO2s have added up to tons of CO2 in our atmosphere. As I mentioned, Glyphwick is also broken down into these divisions. We have our Biological Services Division broken down into wildlife and fisheries, and then fisheries broken down into Great Lakes and inland. And again, we do our act locally projects, such as eliminating phragmites in a wetland in the Lake Superior watershed, or the sea lamprey work we do in the streams of Lake Superior. And we most definitely are adding drops to help fill that bucket. But we're also guilty in the past of compartmentalization. For example, our wild rice biologist, and I'll say this again, in the past, she would get all these notices from the state or the county where they're going to be proposing herbicide applications for maybe weeds. She would make comments about how this may affect the wild rice in that particular water body. However, our wild rice biologist was not making any attempt to speak to our fisheries biologists on how those herbicides may affect the walleye in that lake, or how the effects may pass on to tribal members who may be harvesting those walleye, or what are the effects on those very, very important phytoplankton. The bigger picture was not being seen because of that compartmentalization. Again, we are no longer doing things that way, but I wanted to give that example from our own organization in the hopes that maybe you'll examine all of your agencies and see if this is happening with you as well. Now, I feel like maybe I should qualify my preaching here a little bit. As mentioned, I've been a 22-year politician, and most of my speeches have been to like government-to-government agencies and things like that. They weren't scientists like you all here who understand. I'm preaching to the choir, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So I want to apologize a little bit for that if I seem a little righteous here. But I believe that it's my job to not just ensure that Glyphwick keep in mind the big picture, but to keep pushing other agencies, NGOs, everybody else as well to see the big picture as well, because to us, this is survival. To the world, this is survival. And, you know, I just want to also mention just a little bit some of the projects that Glyphwick is doing to focus on that big picture. One project that we are doing is creating a database of all water withdrawals from the Great Lakes, past and present. Now when a small community-based withdrawal is proposed, every decision maker can see how this little impact will add to the rest. Another bigger picture project is our GIS maps that I love of all the mineral extraction in the Lake Superior Basin. As we know, what happens on the land around Lake Superior has an effect on Lake Superior and the world. Well, and to most of us in this room, Lake Superior is the world, so that's very important. Now, it's imperative we don't look at one development on its own. I'll say it over and over. We all need to have this type of data handy for all projects, no matter how big or how small. And just one more example of one of the last zoning hearings that I attended. It was for a corporate resort variance. It was a request for more docks that were allowed in the local lake plan, management plan. Now I remember the owner stating, we're only going to put a couple more docks in, no big deal. I sure could have used a map at that time of the entire shoreline with all of the current docks covering so much of the lake's most productive zones. We have a map like that now, and it's eye-opening. Now, I want to give a shout out to the Wisconsin DNR. I think it was the Wisconsin DNR, if I remember correctly, that produced a map, or produced a paper that basically said if 20% of the shoreline gets developed, then that's when the detrimental effects to water quality will start being able to be observed. I would only have added one line to that report to say just because an impact can't be observed does not mean that it's not going to have a negative impact. Now, will this bigger picture type mentality change the dynamic at all? I hope so. Will it stop those tiny cuts? Maybe not all of them. But, you know, it's with the hopes of at least changing the perspective of those decision makers at the zoning meetings, at the county meetings, because they certainly do not see things that way. They only see things in a project by project way. So it's incumbent on all of us, as my elder told me, it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that people see that our whole entire globe, that everything is connected. What you do in your backyard or whatever you're at, wherever you're at, it affects the whole entire globe. And speaking of tribal elder, I got to hear another tribal elder speak yesterday. He was speaking of our Ojibwe lunar calendar, which goes by the moons, and there's 13 moons in a year. And every single moon has a name, an Ojibwe name, depending on the season. So March is Onabani Gizis, or crust on the moon, snow moon, for example, crust on the snow moon. Well, April is Ishtagamizagay moon, or maple sugar moon. But today, our maple syrup season is usually over before the maple syrup moon is even here. So climate resilience in the Lake Superior world is priority right now. Our tribes in Lake Superior have survived in the face of long, long odds. But unless we, all our agencies, all our people, Indian, non-Indian, NGOs, every agency, unless we coordinate, cooperate, collaborate, all our environmental efforts on all levels, those small levels, those big levels, starting today, right away, as I know you all are doing. Again, I know I'm preaching somewhat to the choir here. Unless we do that, I fear we will not be surviving. And I'm a tremendous optimist. Again, we've survived through a lot. And I want to be an optimist. But all those trends, all those arrows seem to be pointing in a very bad direction. So let's keep this bigger picture in our minds as we all here complete this tremendous, tremendous important work that we all have. So everybody have a great workshop. Miigwech, Miyu, Bizendawiye, and thank you for